Good evening. A little dreary outside, but very happy inside to be here at the June 17th Jericho Planning Commission meeting, which I will call to order. Thank you for joining us online, and thank you, Planning Commission members, for being here in person, and Chris, as always, thank you. So I'm going to go over the agenda. We'll have time for public comment and people on the Zoom, just to be aware I currently don't have any public here in person. We will approve our minutes of June 3rd and then kind of think of tonight's meeting as a little bit of a reset. Do a little yoga, and yoga, there's always the beginning of a practice where you take like a minute to like arrive at your focus. And I think that's sort of a good analogy for where we are with the Planning Commission, that we are arriving at a new place, starting a new project, and hopefully kind of like resetting, level set, trying to come to this work with an open mind and a little bit of a fresh start, new energy. I'm really excited that we forwarded our amendments to the select board and they're about to review them. And I think this is a good opportunity for tonight to basically listen and learn. So that's really what the two agenda items are mostly about. So the first one around wastewater, we will be talking about our own education, but more importantly, education of the public about what we have all been thinking about and talking about for 2 years, and how do we communicate that to the public and educate the public about the opportunities, the challenges, the financing, the work ahead, pros, the cons, and so forth. Then the next topic is a little bit of a reset, starting our project of a new round of zoning amendments, which we're calling enabling housing, where we'll go beyond the work that we did for the village center and look at other areas. And very important consideration are the natural resources in the outlying areas. We thought it would be a good idea to start with a review of the current Jericho regulations, natural resources overlay, and then bring in some additional research from the Conservation Commission and from the state and some best practices. Then we will hear updates from the town planner and each of us, if we have any other business, and then wrap up and plan and basically decide we'll hold our July 2nd meeting. And then adjourn, and Chris is optimistically put us adjourned a little bit early, 8:30. Anyone need to make any changes to the agenda? Okay. I will invite public comment. So we don't have any public in the room. Do you have any public online?
We have the interns.
Offer a comment.
Interns, but no other public.
Okay. Then we will move on. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 3rd?
Motion to approve.
Chris, and a second.
I have changes to the minutes.
Yes, but we need a second to put it on the table. Okay, so Sabina seconds. So now we can discuss the minutes of June 3rd. Does anybody have any clarifications or corrections or updates to the minutes?
I get to have one finally. On the bottom of page 5, when talking about the housing lots and affordable housing, there's a little note there that says they should be 1 or 2 units, but I actually said they shouldn't. We're always going to have the onesie twosies for affordable units as opposed to the 1s and 2s. So colloquialism, you can decide to keep it or not. It was not verbatim.
Okay. But it doesn't change
It
the
doesn't change
content. Okay, so with that edit, which we can make the minutes. Are we ready to approve the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone opposed?
No.
Wendy's abstained.
Oh, I should abstain too from the one there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Wendy and Sabina, so do we have another? Otherwise, yes. Okay. Nancy's not here, so quickly make sure we take notes. Okay, then the next item, number 5, is to talk about wastewater, and I will pass it over to town planner, Christian.
Great, thank you. So we have 2 students from UVM that are going to be working with us this summer to support our efforts to educate residents of Jericho on our wastewater efforts, developing an outreach and education program. One of them, Cam, started last week, and Finley started this week. I'm actually going to turn it over, I think, to Finley for this slide. She's going to talk a little bit about this illustration that is on the slide here, because the 3 of us spent most of today at the Davis Center on UVM's campus at a full-day conference, I guess, sponsored by the Leahy Institute, that was all about public research and the importance of public research and how to communicate the findings. And one interesting fact I had not known, you probably all know this as Vermonters, but the whole land grant university system was started by a senator from Vermont. So that was a feel-good thing, right? So I'm going to turn it over to Finley. If you want to talk about the image on the slide, and then I think Cam's going to take over after that.
Yeah, so you can see in this image, to be fair, it was not just Cam and I who created this. We had some help from some interns from Senator Welch's office, along with a member of UVM staff. But basically, our task was to kind of simulate like a community investigation into like a hypothetical old building in a small Vermont town, and to kind of figure out what community members wanted from it, and what maybe the future of it might be, and then create a creative mural representation of those ideas and hopes and goals. And so ours was we basically talked to other people, and we all were kind of being creative, and this is what we came up with. And I thought it was really fun to think about, okay, like what might someone from this small Vermont town want, what might they need, what are different things that it could provide, and then how do we show that visually. And I feel like it kind of got the juices flowing for what we're going to be doing this summer.
Thanks, Finley.
We
Cam?
should say welcome.
Okay.
I should have said at the beginning, welcome Finley and Cam. We're very happy to have you with us. We've been looking forward. We worked on the idea of, thanks to Wendy, that's why you're here, the planning commission member here, facilitated the ability to work together. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me as well. I'm really excited to work for you guys this summer. I think it's gonna be a great summer, very productive one as well. So yeah, I'll take it over from here. I'll introduce myself in more detail in a second. I'm just gonna go over the goals real quick. One of them is introductions, of course. The second one's gonna be just get to know the project scope and deliverables that are gonna come out of the project we're gonna be working on this summer for you guys. And then the last part's just going to be feedback on our plan for community outreach. Yeah. Awesome. So some introductions. My name's Cam Winter. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm a rising senior at UVM. I'm studying natural resource planning. It's called sustainability ecology policy. It's like 8 million different words, but I like to just call it natural resource planning because it's simple. And I'm also a member of the UVM rugby team, so that's usually where I spend a lot of my time outside of work. So yeah.
I'm Finley. I'm from Littleton, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver. It's like a suburb of Denver. I'm also a rising senior at UVM. I'm studying food systems with a focus in community and international development, and I have a really strong personal interest in planning and development as well. I really love music, skiing. You can see me here. I was just in the Netherlands for a semester. That's me skiing in the Austrian Alps, which was super cool. I love to be outside, and I'm a really big cook. So
Where do you think that's coming from?
I don't know, because the first time, so Finley, your mic was a little scratchy there, but the first time you spoke, it
Yeah.
sounded
Can
great.
you try, just say something again, because it was like interference from something.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds perfect.
That's so bizarre.
Do you want me to
Yeah.
just do the whole thing again?
No,
We can hear it.
it's just a little fuzzy, but
Yeah.
now it's fine.
Okay, we're good for now. Thank you.
You want us to introduce ourselves?
Oh,
Or do
sure.
they already all know us?
Well, they only know what I have told them about.
Introductions would be really great.
Yeah.
Maybe you should tell us what he said.
Yeah, I think it's good to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Susan. I've been on the planning commission for, I don't know, like 6-ish, 8-ish years maybe. I also love to cook and I love to ski and I like to sail. And I've lived in Jericho for 27 years, and before that I lived in San Francisco and Boston. And I come from a business background, like strategic planning. So land use is new, but now I've been doing it for a long time and I love learning. That's one reason I love the job.
I'm Chris Brown. I have lived in Jericho since 2005. I guess it's 20 years. I'm an architect and I've been on the planning commission. I think I've been on for 7 years. So you're longer. Yeah, sure. So anyway, I'm very, I look forward to working with you guys and making a great public outreach campaign for this project.
Hi, I'm Wendy Beret. We met actually during the interview process. So happy that you are joining us now. I've been in Jericho a while, about 30-ish years, I guess. And I don't know how long I've been on the planning commission. Somewhere between Chris and Susan.
Longer than me.
Yeah. And I work at UVM. I work at the Center for Teaching and Learning at UVM.
I'm Eric Littman. I've been on the planning commission, I think it's 8 years now, about the same amount of time as Susan. I think we started within a few weeks of each other. Lived in Jericho for, I think it's 33 years now. Raised my kids, put them out through high school and off they went. When I'm not doing this, I have a consulting business in market research and strategic planning. And I've been skiing since I was 3. So this is the right place to live.
My name's Sabina. I met Cam in the office a couple days ago, but not Finley yet. I'm a retired veterinarian, and right now I spend my time doing conservation work for nonprofits in Jericho. I've lived here for about 10 years. Definitely a flatlander. And I really enjoy gardening, and I'm also really into baking and cooking.
I'm Sarah Jane, or SJ. I have been in Jericho now for 12 years, I think it is. And in Vermont, a little longer than that, but I grew up in Western New York State, so more Midwest, less New York City. I work at the University of Vermont in the Department of Psychiatry as a researcher. And I'm still kind of in the midst of parenting, so I've got elementary school and middle schoolers at home. I am not a skier. I'm the one that sits at the bottom of the hill with all the stuff and a book while my spouse and children ski for the day. I sit there with coffee and a book, and I'm very happy to do so. But I'm so excited that you all are here. I'm really appreciative of the energy and the effort and the time that you all are going to be spending on this. And just having some fresh ideas. These are things that we've all been talking about, but I think it'll be nice to have some new ideas and some new energy in the project.
Great, thank you guys. All right, Cam.
Awesome. Yeah, it was really nice to get introduced to all of you guys. I look forward to learning more about you guys and what you do. It's gonna be a good summer. All right, back to it. All right, so the purpose of what we're doing here is the town plan itself calls for a lot of things, and it calls for more walkable, dense communities. And one of the barriers to achieving that kind of overarching goal is better wastewater infrastructure. Um, and so you guys, before we came here, have already been doing a lot of steps to achieve that. You have your wastewater feasibility report, and that was already finalized. And then I identified a few locations for the wastewater treatment. But I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, the select board chose to pursue the Riverside location. Um, and also, along with that, town support is needed to vote in a bond so more studies and reports can be created and actually implementation of this. So yeah, you can go on the next slide. So we're gonna start off with a little timeline here. Our internship goes from June to August, but we hope that the deliverables we provide will be able to span well past that. So however long it takes to get to that point where you're voting on a bond, you'll have these deliverables still, and they'll work well. So we have 4 here. I'll go more into detail in the next slide about these deliverables. Anything you see on this timeline that's overlapping, it'll be me and Finley will be working on it side by side and not directly together. It's like the one pro of having 2 interns is we can work on a lot of things at the same time. So, and those stars right there are going to be the actual time we deliver each of these 4 deliverables, and also have a planning commission check-in. So at the bottom, you'll see the project team. So the leads for these projects are either going to be me or Finley or both of us. And we're going to be getting oversight from Chris Shaheen. And we're also going to be getting support from a lot of committees and groups. We have the Planning Commission Working Group, with the CCRPC. I also am planning out to reach out to the Wastewater Task Force, Conservation Committee, Affordable Housing Committee. So Sabina and SJ, keep eyes out for an email from one of us, probably me. We just want to try to involve as many committees as possible while we're working on this to get as many perspectives. Next slide. Yeah, so here's a more in detailed version of these deliverables I was talking about. So the first one is going to be just a compilation of background information on Jericho's wastewater efforts, the town plan, policies, actions, and related goals. And it's going to go over a lot of interviews with other municipalities who have tried to implement or have successfully implemented wastewater in their town. It's just going to document their experience with wastewater development. So yeah, and then the second deliverable is what I'm actually currently working on. This deliverable is just getting insight into resident perspectives on current wastewater efforts. Specifically, I want to know what residents like and just what they don't like about the wastewater treatment facility. It'll get through like info through interviews, surveys. I'll also do public outreach events. And so, yeah, I've been developing over the past week, I've been working on questions for community leaders and also questions for surveys. I met with Wendy Verai, so huge shout out to her. I met with her and we worked on the questions and the survey questions, and we have some good ones. So I'm hoping that next week I'll be able to start using both of those questions. And also shout out, I sent out some emails to community leaders. Chris Brown, Susan Brees, they already responded. So we have a meeting set already. So we're going to go over those community leader interview questions together. So yeah, we're on a good path to get this deliverable done on time. And these 2 deliverables kind of funnel into the outreach and education campaign that we want to create surrounding this this idea. So we're gonna take all the information we found from the best practices research and the community report, and we're gonna come up with media campaigns, some sort of video, flyers, honestly, probably all of them. And I've also been contacting some marketing people at the University of Vermont to have kind of an expert on board who can provide insight and maybe even help design some of these outreach tools. And then lastly, we have our wastewater toolkit. This is just going to be a summary of all of our deliverables, our experiences, and just any like useful information that we can provide for other states to reference when they're going through the same actions of trying to implement wastewater in their town. So yeah, so then next steps, we're going to begin outreach to neighboring towns. We're going to start rolling out these community surveys as well as the community leaders. I'm hoping to get a table, not this Thursday, but hopefully next Thursday, maybe at the farmers market. And so we can be in person, connecting with Jericho residents and getting them to answer some questions for the survey. Yeah. And yeah, so then the last thing I have for you guys, and I can pass it back, is just questions about, is the project moving in the right direction? What are some events and areas where we can engage with the community besides the farmers market? I think that would be great to know other places we can outreach. And then are there any groups or individuals that we should connect with that I didn't mention at all?
This is your opportunity to.
I can go. One thing that immediately jumped to mind, Cam, is so Jericho has kind of reimagined our town meeting. And so we no longer just meet in March. We have 3 meetings, and the first of those meetings is usually sometime in the fall, and that's kind of a visioning meeting where the community gets together and talks about their goals and ideas for the upcoming year and beyond. And so that's a place, A, where you could do tabling, but B, where you could certainly take some time and be part of that conversation. So I can give you the name of the leader of that task force, yeah, we're meeting June 30th. We've got our new.
About, not at the community meeting itself, but at the town meeting, just meeting.
I think that they, Cam and Finley probably wouldn't be able to present because they wouldn't be there, but I think that they could meet with the town meeting task force to understand what the meeting is gonna look like, what the opportunities are, what the dates are, so that you can put those dates as community contact points into whatever your blueprint is for a timeline.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Yeah. And then also, I'm sure you know about MMC TV. They do a lot of our videos. I mean, they record our meetings and stuff, but they also do a lot of informational videos for the town. The town clerk uses MMC TV to, go through when we didn't know how to do an absentee ballot, for example. And so they're a really great resource, and they do a lot of community outreach.
And is the new radio station going to be up and running by?
I think so.
Anytime soon?
I think they're organizing this summer.
Yeah, so that might be a great Q&A conversation kind of dialogue that can happen. I've never been to Harvest Market, but is that the kind of place where this kind of material could be disseminated, or is it too chaotic?
Both.
Yeah.
So Cam and Finley their last day is gonna be around August 15th.
Right, but
Yeah.
we're gonna be advertising.
But if they have material
Right.
that
Yeah.
then we could potentially use.
Yeah,
that.
I think it's good to think about how, like in terms of deliverables, how to package it so it can be used at.
Yeah, because I'm
being
thinking
repackaged
about
at Harvest
that
Market and stuff like that.
wastewater toolkit. I'm not and I don't need to know, it's too early yet. I'm not clear on whether that wastewater toolkit is a general toolkit that can be used by anyone, or if that toolkit maybe will also include the blueprint for us moving forward on how to continue the campaign that you've started. And some of the strategery and materials and touch points and things that we want to be hitting along the way once you've left.
The toolkit is more a product for other towns in the state to learn from the process that we went through, to help them think how they might be able to be strategic.
Then might I add another deliverable, which is some handoff material for what do we think, we being you guys, what do you all think is are the important things that we need to carry forward for the next year?
Yeah, that is actually the third. Go ahead, Cam, you were gonna.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I could jump in on that. So that, yeah, I was gonna say that I think that will fall great into the third deliverable.
Cool.
The big idea that I was thinking of that stuck out to me a lot is the Waitsfield website for their wastewater efforts. They created a website that included a lot of, like, they had their FA, like a video on why it matters. They had a frequently asked questions section. They also had an update page where if you scroll, it would update on the entire wastewater effort from their start to when they voted it through. And that like website is always there and always accessible for people. And so it's something that can be continuously updated even past our internship date, which will be good, good.
Great. Cam, this is Wendy. I had a couple of comments. Thank you for going over this again. It sounds really comprehensive. I appreciate the efforts that you all have put into it so far. I was thinking when you were talking about interviewing towns that have had successful projects, I was also thinking it might be interesting to interview towns who have not had successful projects. And so that we can, kind of a lessons learned, so we know what to avoid. And if they have like insights on why they think that their projects failed, it would be really interesting to know that information. And then I had just a handful of ideas for outreach places where you could go to do broader community outreach this summer that I think would fit into your timeline. Things that start up in July would be the concert series at Mill River. So this is just for general community outreach. I don't know, like if you have like a QR code for the survey that you can like hand out to folks, and rather than trying to have them fill out a paper survey at a concert. So they start up in July, and then there's community pizza at the elementary school that starts up also in July. You can get that date from the Jericho Underhill Food Hub website. I'm thinking it's July 8th, but I don't know. So those would be just ways in which you can get in contact with a really broad audience of Jericho residents. Like a lot of younger families tend to show up, especially at those pizza bakes.
Picking up on that, I would take from Wendy's suggestion here. Westford voted down community septic just a year and a half ago, so I think that would be extremely educational to figure out what went wrong there and how does Jericho avoid that same fate. So talking to Westford about it is very recent. Another angle that I would encourage you to take is to talk to many of the business owners in town. Talk to the folks who run JCAT. Talk to the folks who run the Jerry Hill hardware store. Talk to the folks who run the supermarket down at the corner and a few other things, because they are likely beneficiaries of a good wastewater system and will likely be well attuned to the voice of the public. So I would encourage you to reach out to those groups, not just the persons gathering at a community event, but to people who can shape public opinion. And those are key people.
It's a really good idea. Yeah, appreciate that.
And I also just wanted to jump in. I'm really glad that I think we're on the same page about interviewing people or towns that were unsuccessful. I just checked my outline actually, and I have Westford written down for a town that I'm going to reach out to probably tomorrow. So I think that's, great minds think alike.
I would just, I was going to, before Wendy and Eric both said that, I was going to suggest we look at towns where it didn't succeed. I think in general, I think what you guys, I love your energy and I think you're off to a great start. I think what we have found since I've been on the planning commission is it's, I don't know if it's unique, but it's a community that's challenging to do outreach with because people are pretty diverse. Everybody has different things going on, and it's hard to get everybody to sort of be aware of what's going on and have enough information to make an informed decision when it comes time to a vote. So I think you're off to a great start, and I would just encourage sort of you to have a really open mind about how outreach might go, because it's a not an easy thing to do in here. So it's not super helpful in feedback probably, but I just feel like it's gonna be, and I think the challenge will be largely with people who are not in the Riverside area. Because the question will be, it's going to come down to money, and it's going to come down to how is this going to benefit me, and why should I pay for someone else to get this? And so, yeah, that's, I guess, what I would say.
So I'm going to pick up on what you're saying, Chris. And in case you don't know, we have 3 distinct village centers, and each one of them has really very different characters and different restraints upon them. So keep that in mind as you're talking to Jericho residents, that if you're in the Riverside area, you've got a very different view of what's happening in town than if you're in Jericho Center. And if you're in the Corners area, your perspectives are very different there too. So getting everybody on the same page, as Chris is saying, is going to be really hard.
But I do think that one of the reasons that this is such an important project is that our school age population is declining, and so that has a direct tax implication for every citizen in Jericho, and so that's a real world thing that is will benefit everybody in the community if we have more housing and more families and more kids in school. So that's one of the reasons that this would benefit everybody. And then there's, tax gains or tax benefits and business and there's a lot of benefits, but I think, this is the success of this project is going to come down to explain to people why it's important that we do this and how everybody will benefit.
Yeah, I think two things that just jumped into my head after hearing Chris and Eric talk. One of them is definitely take a look at the calendars for the Deborah Rawson library, but also for the Jericho Town Library, especially to get into the Jericho Center. And they've got lots of events, and some of their events are really well attended. And then the other thing was, as a leader who's probably on your list, but if not, to reach out to Edie Granger. Thank you. I always invert the letters. Who's our rep, but also is president of or chair of the school board. Thank you. But she's done a lot of thinking about this on kind of that bigger scale, and in thinking about taxes has a lot of experience trying to communicate with different aspects of our town and our neighboring towns. I think that she'd be a really important leader to talk to and interview.
Do you mind repeating that name one more time? It got a little cut out.
Yeah, it's Edie, it's spelled Edye, and then Branning, Granning. Is that right?
Yes, yes, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll add in a couple more things. Who wants wastewater? Nobody wants wastewater, right? It's a means to an end. So you guys, that's like what we're kind of communicating here is really like the what is it going to provide to the community? And we don't really have the time or the graphic design skills or the communications expertise to relay to people the why in a really compelling, enticing way. And so I'd say just really kind of be inspired by the idea that it's the means to the end. So we have to be really clear with you about what that end is and how is the wastewater instrumental in achieving those goals. So sure, we want to give the facts and we want to give the data about the wastewater system. We don't want to gloss over it, but on the other hand, we want to kind of eyes on the prize. Said about the farmers market in terms of the survey. So you probably have already read the wastewater feasibility study. That study conducted a survey of residents in directly serviceable areas. So I didn't get a survey, but hundreds of people did get a survey and they completed a survey. So we want to kind of avoid feeling like it's duplicating, because sometimes you get people who are like, I answer this same survey every 6 months and nothing happens. So we want to be clear about the purpose of this survey and also in some way try to make it different and clear about how it's different and the goal that it's providing. But I think that survey was very extensive and gave a lot of really good information. Which led me to think that it seems like we should be asking the select board, or if you think it should be the planning commission, to kind of set the stage for these guys to be coming in. So if they're going to be using Front Porch Forum or other things that nobody knows them, that you need to be deputized. And so that you have the authority and people are paying attention and they see a continuum of a project, not just the sort of random public outreach, because nobody's heard anything about wastewater in Jericho for 6 months. Maybe
A couple of weeks.
no, it's been a long time, whereas we had the study, people did a survey, they came to community meetings, there were select board meetings about it, we talked about it here in the planning commission doing the town plan, but literally it has not really been a topic on an agenda for quite some time. So in a way, there's a little bit of a cold start, and I'm thinking, how do we give them a warm start? So maybe we should think about that a little bit, like welcome, they're going to be reaching out, and some sort of parallel communication to the community that's from entities that people recognize, like select board or the affordable housing committee or the concert, I don't know what you need some ambassadors, I think, to warm up the ground for you. And I didn't really think of that until right now. So I think that's a little bit of a gap that we have to close.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sorry, you go.
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's a really good point. And as for the survey, I read through the feasibility report. And yeah, they do have a very extensive survey. But I used those questions, and with Wendy, we developed questions, and we're developing questions that are short. They have nothing to do with any, like, they have nothing to do with the survey questions asked in that feasibility study. I just wanted to make this survey so easy, like so easy to do, so easy to answer. So yeah, so that's good, and it's a good point too about the deputization. That's a good comment. I like that, and that'll definitely make things roll smoother.
We should think of sort of like a rollout, just sort of how the whole thing is kick off, but then what are the touch points throughout? Not just this summer, but even beyond that. I mean, it's going to involve coordinating with the task force, but we should really
Right.
think about what the flow
And that-
of information is going to be.
Even that the town has formed a task force and who's on the task force and.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, a resource for you guys, if you want it, is just looking back at old meetings when this topic was discussed at the select board level, and did we ever have a formal meeting? I don't think we really had one here, but there's definitely old select board meetings, if you can find it on the agenda. And, yeah, or those things were recorded and are on the MMCTV, homepage, so it just might be informative.
We did have a formal meeting, the planning commission. The feasibility study was basically commissioned by the select board. But we did have a couple meetings where we decided we wanted to submit a formal opinion about the report.
Right,
So we
right.
did do that,
Yeah.
that was pretty significant
Yeah.
discussion.
But your point is a good one too, like even watching the 3 meetings that the feasibility folks gave when they were giving their report, and you could skip the formal part and just go to the Q&A section,
Yeah.
and listen to the discussion there, and maybe make note of some of the speakers and their concerns.
I think I just want to add, I think that word of mouth will be probably particularly useful in a community like this. And so I thought of two, one is a person, one is a group, but there's a group called Wisdom House that is looking to build senior housing in Riverside. They have been very successful in garnering a lot of public support for their project over the past couple of years, I think. They have a lot of connections, and they would benefit directly from wastewater. So getting them on board with this and having them spread the word would be very powerful. And the other related person to talk to is the developer, who is not a Jericho resident, Greg Tatro. He has a lot of skin in this game, and he would be a great interview for a video, but he would be worth talking to because he would have a lot to say, I think, about the value of it and potential gain.
There is also a Facebook group that's pretty active called the Jericho Residents, I think is all it's called, Jericho Residents. Which I know that there was a lot of chatter on there recently about our vote to expand the select board. So I think it's kind of like not as official as Front Porch Forum, but I think it has a decent number of followers. And that people rely on to sort of talk almost like offline about stuff. So if we know who's on there who could potentially help you publicize either a survey or an event or a flyer or something. That was one of my notes.
That was, I think, really super helpful information. Cam and Finley are going to be coming back. So the wastewater task force is not going to, it looks like they're not going to be meeting until a little later.
2026.
Well, a little later in the summer. So I do think right now the planning commission is the best body to be giving feedback to Cam and Finley, so they will be coming back. Cam mentioned he's scheduled a bunch of interviews. He is meeting with each of the select board members. So we are engaging them that way. And we can certainly talk a little bit about this at the joint select board, planning commission meeting that's happening next week too, so. Any last words, Cam and Finley?
No, thank you so much. I have a long list now of leads to follow, so I'm really happy about that. It's always nice to have a list of things to look into, especially with something like this. Thank you guys so much. It was really nice to meet you as well. Look forward
Sure,
to
thank
talking
you
with you
very
guys more.
Yeah, and
Right.
thank you, Finley. Thank you, Finley, too.
Thank you guys. I'm really excited for this summer. I think it's going to be great. And I also have some percolating questions now. So I'm excited to get to work.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys are welcome to stick around for the rest of the magic that's going to happen here at the commission meeting. So yeah, thank you guys. All right.
You're keeping the ball.
Yes. So, and we're almost staying on track for time. Okay. Next item on the agenda.
Is, well, it's listed here as the overview of the natural resources overlay, but we're starting with with sort of it's within the context of our next bit of work that we're calling enabling housing.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, so we are continuing this good discussion of enabling housing tonight. Although tonight we are going to get into some parallel work that we're going to be doing related to the natural resources overlay, or the NRO. So I'm just going to refer to it as NRO. We're going to be looking at ways to encourage housing outside of the village centers where there are natural resources and where the natural resource overlay is. We're going to need to factor that into our discussion. So tonight, we're going to cover the town plan policies related to housing and conservation. It's really a recap of what we talked about at our last meeting. We're going to review the current natural the NRO and the recent work of the Conservation Commission. And then we're going to look at some examples of types of housing that we might want to encourage outside of the village centers. It's just sort of here's where we may be going. It's just sort of food for thought. I also wanted to thank Sabina and Susan for really helping frame the discussion tonight around this. Really good feedback on developing what we're going to be going over right now. So the first, this is just sort of a reminder of housing and conservation and where they overlap in the town plan. In general, housing should be directing growth to the village centers. But the town plan also calls for protecting Jericho's irreplaceable natural resources. But then also making sure that housing in other areas, so in those outlying areas, are clustered and have the least impact. So in terms of town plan policies specific to conservation, so one establishes several tiers of conservation areas, which are generally reflected directly in the NRO. This up on the screen says map 9 from the town plan that's shown on the screen. It shows the tiered conservation priorities, and it includes the specific resources. So this is the rare natural communities, vernal pools, riparian areas, river corridors, wetlands, road crossings, ledge, and cliff habitats. This directly aligns with the NRO map that is in zoning, except that this map includes forest blocks. That's that mauve. That's not easy to read. It's that mauve sort of hatched color. That is currently not on the NRO map, but I'm going to talk about that a little later. So the NRO. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I can't read that from here, really. Is it important for tonight that we can read that?
No, it's
Okay.
important to know that it's there. It's important to know that it just maps certain resources. This is in the town plan, and this is what informed the map that's in the zoning overlay. You don't need to know exactly where each resource is. What's most important is that there are a series of resources.
Okay.
They're in the town plan, and that is what is shaping what is in zoning.
Question, this is possibly off topic, but do you ever overlay this with the 1926 USGS map and where there were houses and roads at that time in history?
I have not done that, and I don't know if. I'm sure we have that data somewhere as a GIS player. I haven't seen that.
Again, I quite follow it.
1926, the U.S. Geological Survey did a map of every square inch of the country, with roads and houses and things marked upon it. It'd be very interesting to look at what did Jericho have in 1926? Where were people living? Where were the houses? Where were the farms? And map that to where we are now.
My understanding, just from what I've heard people saying, is that there were a lot more open fields and a lot less forest cover.
That part is true.
Yeah.
But where were people living is the other question on that.
Where were people living relative to these priority areas?
Yeah. How many of them had people living in the 1920s? And why did they leave?
That'd be interesting to look at.
What overlay there is.
Maybe CCRCP has that layer somewhere in their archives. Because they made these maps for us.
What would you take away as a conclusion from that? Like,
How different our settlement pattern is now than what it was then, and whether or not there are areas that we are including for settlement that were not used then, and areas that we are excluding that were used back then. You know, there may be a lot of lands that were perfectly suitable in 1920, and we've decided now we're no longer, and vice versa. People lived in floodplains back then, they don't anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think probably people lived further away from the flood areas and the rivers.
well, one of the questions I had when I first got here was we have a Nashville road, but I don't know where Nashville was. What was Nashville? I don't know if there actually was a community there or not.
I want to know
Could be
about
a name.
Harps Way.
Could be a name, just a name. maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
a lot of them are people's names.
It could have changed, that's now West Bolt.
Oh, yeah.
Just, so the previous version of the town plan had a map. And, then there was like this big, and there was a big project to update the natural resources mapping. And so the planning commission, this was maybe one of our earliest projects, we updated one couple of little parts of that town plan. And one of the things that we updated were the mapping, were the areas mapped to identify natural resources. Then we updated the NRO. Then with the new town plan, we had new mapped information. So the new mapped information is in the new town plan. And now we have the job of updating the NRO. So they sort of move kind of like that. And we've done this before.
We're looking at where were these steep slopes and river boundaries, stagnant water, moving water.
Because the previous NRO was not really that effective, and it didn't really have, it wasn't tied to any maps. It was only tied to,
it
or,
wasn't tied to regulation.
Right.
It identified the resources, but that was as far as it went.
Right.
It didn't guide or have teeth, regulatory teeth, as we say.
right.
Here
And
are resources.
what was in the regulations previously, prior to that NRO update was very vague, like scenic areas and high slopes, and try not to ruin them was pretty much it. And so then the new NRO took that, relied on that map. So we had to get the town plan updated before we could update the regulations.
Got it. Actually, that's a good segue into exactly like what is in the NRO now. Because the NRO has actually two components. So one is the map, which is what you're talking about, and that literally says, here's where the resource is, and it shows where it is on the parcel. And then the second part of that are the standards for how those resources are actually protected. So they go together that way. So I'll just give one example. So one specific resource included in the upland community is a forest riparian habitat. Those are mapped on the NRO. So where that resource is mapped, that's what triggers the NRO regulations, and the regulations for that specific resource, it doesn't preclude development in those areas, but it has guidance for protecting them. That includes things like, maintaining that the area is primarily naturally vegetated, and requiring stream crossings to be large enough to pass fish and continue the natural stream bed. Those are not all of the requirements for that specific resources. Those are just examples. And then each feature that is on that map has specific guidelines that are tailored to each natural resource. All right, so this is getting into that update component. So now I'm going to go over a little bit about what the Conservation Commission has been doing specifically to verify Jericho's forest blocks. That's a resource that has already been identified by the state. So the Conservation Commission was just sort of doing a ground check to make sure that they agreed with what that information was. So you can see on this map here where Jericho's forest blocks connect to adjacent towns. And that's critical to maintaining a connected habitat. So that illustrates like the scope of the natural resource protection. It's not just in Jericho, it's really the statewide resource. The numbers that you see on this map, I don't know if you can see them where you're sitting, but there are little numbers on those forest blocks. Those are just used to identify the specific forest block that are then referenced in the more full report that the consultant did in working with the Conservation Commission. So this work was funded by the select board, and it was part of the work to update the town plan in 2023. So some of you have probably already seen this, or maybe this is the first time, I'm not sure. We need to add this forest block as a resource to the NRO map and then update the standards to regulate development that is within or near the forest blocks.
It's a question about this Arrowwood report, because I was looking for that. Is that the one from 2013, or is there a newer one?
No, this was just done as.
This is 2023, is that?
It was done in 2023, finished in 2024.
Okay.
So it's not a report per se, it's a web tool, but we can talk about getting that online.
Okay, cool.
And I think it was used to update the future.
It was,
changes back to the town
it was
plan.
happening, concurrently with our work on the town plan,
Okay.
but it wasn't 100% complete. So they were sort of in tandem, but not done at the same time. So we David White consulted with Arrowwood during his time working on the town plan, and was able to take the information and use it, even though the report wasn't totally done.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I ask a really stupid question?
There were no stupid questions.
Where's number 22?
Wow, you can see those numbers.
I see Jericho Center 21 and 40th now, I say 23. Where's 22? I have glasses on.
That wouldn't help me.
I guess I'll have to get back to you on that.
Chris,
My question is, how do we envision using this information?
So this is a literal map of a resource that would then get added to the natural resource overlay. So that if there's a forest block on a property, it's going to be developed, and there would be some guidelines associated with how to develop around within those resources.
Am I correct that some of those forest blocks are more important or more sensitive than others?
Right, so part of the work that we asked Arrowwood to do for us is to give them rankings. So they went through and ranked each one with a specific set of criteria, and then that will enable us to have a prioritization list. And so it's not, I mean, they're all important, but we recognize that some carry more weight than others. And it's not necessarily size related, in some cases, it could be a very small piece, but that small piece is the only thing in town connecting two bigger pieces, and so its importance gets elevated just by that factor that is a connector piece. So it's not as intuitive as in saying just like, oh, the big ones are more important, or most important.
And so having that information, I guess where my mind goes then is not every forest block is like every other forest block. And so do we want the regulations and the standards to be the same for all forest blocks? Or
Well, I
treat the high priority ones differently?
right, I think that's gonna be the conversation that we have, is how granular do we get with yes, so yes.
The good thing about the NRO though is it has that structure already. Like if you go back a slide or two, yeah, the NRO already has groupings of things with a primary and a secondary. And some of the standards are organized that way. So everything in that primary category are subject to standards 1 through 7, and everything in the secondary are standards 8 through 12. And then within 8 through 12, maybe there's 13, 14 that only apply to vernal pool. So it's trying to not have like every single resource have its own standards. There's groupings. So a quick thing would be, we potentially have a third priority so that, a certain subset of the forest blocks apply to a grouping of standards.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I guess I bring that up just because like for a lot of these maps, I think that's important to say, because for a lot of these maps, it's the whole friggin' town.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a good regulation is gonna be specific where it needs to be specific and have guidance and flexibility in other areas. So the regulation is very specific. You can't be within 800 feet of a vernal pool or something like that. But then the guidelines for another resource are gonna be a guideline that you just have to achieve, and it leaves flexibility for how you do that.
So the numbers on the forest blocks would correspond. You could look it up, say, I'm in number 18, that's ranked.
I'm in number 18, that's ranked XYZ because of ABC, and you could dial into that one and
Okay.
get the specifics on it and just say, this is the information for block 18. And I would say, yes, it is everywhere, but like, to me, that's the good point, is it's everywhere, and it is the foundation of everything that is good in Jericho. And so it's not, I don't see it as a negative. And I'm not saying you're saying it's a negative, but I don't think we should think of it that way.
I agree, and I want to make sure that the nuance is clear for any audience or anyone looking back on this to understand that A, we're not treating it as a negative, and B, that doesn't mean that we're thinking blanket across all the natural resources, across all the town, they all get treated in this one way, and that nuance I think is important for people to understand.
And also what Chris said at the beginning, Christine said, it's not that these resources lose development. Really, none of them do literally, except for the vernal pool, high elevation blocks.
Yeah.
It's all like peaceful coexistence. How do you enable people to do what they want or need to do with their property without obliterating the resource?
Might make sense, what I think might make sense is to, within these communities, identify which ones of them are most likely to be developed in a way that is favorable or in a way that's unfavorable. And are they close to a major road? Do they have access to power? Do they have the right slope to be developed? So on and so forth. And once we identify them, try to say, if you're going to develop, we'd rather develop here and not in this other one that's far away from a road that has the location of the spotted woodpecker or whatever it is, and protect the more valuable and important ones rather than ones that are easily accessible, but we really need to keep But because it's so easy to accessible, someone's gonna go in there, cut all the trees down and
Yeah.
put up houses.
I think that's a good segue.
It is in a couple of ways, because, and first I'm gonna segue back first, because when the working group was looking at the future land use map stuff, and we were looking at these areas beyond the village centers, we did have a list of criteria, like which of these areas are more suitable for development, looking at things like the types of soil, is the road paved, is it gravel? I mean, there were a number of factors that we looked at, so I think we already have a general idea of areas that we might want to prioritize over or not. But
That
then,
might tie back to the 1926 USGS piece where there were
yeah,
clusters of housing there.
we'll take a look at that. But I think this is the segue that Sabina was referring to. So these next two slides, I mean, they illustrate where our work on enabling housing and protecting and conserving Jericho's natural resources overlap. Now, these are just illustrations on where this could go and how we can realize the goals in the town plan to, and I'm going to go back to what was on an earlier slide, to incentivize clustering for any new development that may be permitted into areas of parcels that will have the least impact. So the scenario on this slide, it shows different ways that development can impact a site and its natural resources. So the image that's second from the left, the first one on the left, that's a nice pristine site. Let's assume it's pristine site. The second from the left, that just shows a standard subdivision with really no consideration of what the natural resources are. The two on the right show alternatives for clustering development in ways that are with different protections for different resources. This illustrates, I think, the importance of the standards that get incorporated into the update, because they are going to provide the guidance that influences what the specific outcome is. I say you were talking about something before that really made me think of this slide.
Before you go on,
yeah.
you might go back for a second. What can you differentiate between the last two again? Is it just based on what resources or what natural features are present?
Yeah, these are just conceptual. So it's really just showing there are two ways to cluster development on the site
Got it.
that protect different things depending on what your priority is.
And do these all have the same number of units on them?
Yes. Yeah.
But I also think, this is probably just getting into the weeds a tad too much, but the last one I think is suggested to be possibly the most preferred alternative, let's just say. And one of the things that it is in the body of the text that goes along with these pictures talks about the fact that when you develop a property in the example on the far right, you are allowing everyone in that development to enjoy and appreciate the resource as a whole, instead of chunking it up and making everybody have a tiny piece of it and not, so in the far right example, you see those little stippled lines. Those are trails for the people who live in that neighborhood to enjoy, right? So it goes beyond just that little cluster of housing. It's saying, yes, let's cluster the housing and protect the resources, but also allow everyone to enjoy it a little more equally.
Do you have the reference of where this came from?
I do.
Yeah, and also, so after this meeting, Sabina has pulled together a couple of links to resources, additional resources to dive into this a little more. I think this came from one of those presentation sets and the links that you.
I think it is, and if it's not, I can add it to that.
Oh, thank you. I really thought.
Another factor which we haven't touched on yet, but we're going to be looking at as much as we can affordability and how to get diverse housing types. The other thing about doing a type of development that's shown on the left here is you're potentially building less infrastructure. So there could be cost savings associated with doing a cluster development like that.
The one on the right.
Oh yeah, what did I say on the left?
Left.
Yes. Does anyone else have to do this? Yeah. So it's on the right. Yes. So that's just another another factor to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking about the road cost, that would probably have shared community septic. Close to, you can have a sidewalk on the main road, like it has a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. An opportunity for a more formal shared open space in the middle that helps foster a sense of community as well as that open space around it for other types of recreation. Oh, sorry, I went on to this next one. I should have asked if there are any other questions before moving on, but I think, okay, we're good. So this slide, this also shows, different scenarios on the same site. We can consider different standards for different situations. This, I think, gets to the point that SJ made earlier. Each site is different, and those included in the NRO are going to require some thought as to what approach is best depending on the site specifics, and we can incorporate some guidance on that in the standards as we put through what that is. So like the two images on the previous slide, these 4 development scenarios, I mean, they just show different design approaches with different impacts on what that natural resource. They all have the same number of units, but from a design standpoint, you're really getting a different outcome. That is it for our overview. So I don't know if there's, I think there's been some good discussion and questions going throughout this overview. So I don't know if there's anything else, discussion, questions, or comments before getting into what the next steps are going to be. Great. So in terms of next steps, and this is looking more broader, pulling back out to the whole enabling housing initiative. So I am working on pulling together panelists for a developer conservation roundtable discussion. I think that'll be really helpful to get developers in here that can share with us, what their experiences or how they experience zoning in terms of barriers that we might want to be looking at, or things that we can include in zoning that would be real incentives for them. I don't know what those answers are. I'm really looking forward to having that discussion. A couple of you, I know SJ and Susan forwarded some names to me, so I've got them on the list. I've gotten some good suggestions from staff at CCRPC. David White has connected me with some people, so I think we've got a nice group to pull from. I have to see what their availability is. So that's one thing. And then the other, I know I mentioned this before, but really having, putting together a timeline and mapping out what we are doing. So at the last meeting, I presented again, Susan and I had sort of presented as sort of how we might chunk this out. I need to get that onto a calendar and just make sure we're going to stay on track by the end of the year. Hopefully we can have something by the end of December.
I'm really interested in the panel discussion, so thank you for pulling that together. I think that's going to be informative. And I've started to just do some reading on land trust partnerships, so that you can serve a bulk land, like 300 acres, like this one that's happening in South Burlington with the folks that ran Bread and Butter Farm, conserving 360 acres of ag land and then 16 acres set aside. Don't quote me on the numbers, but a body, some acreage is set aside for affordable housing and working with a developer within that. So those partnerships to me, and that goes back to Susan, a comment that you made a couple meetings ago, that these things don't have to be mutually exclusive, that it can be a both and. And I'm wondering if we can get some of those folks who are involved in those partnerships as part of that discussion.
And the Vermont, the VHCD, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board is a very unique entity in Vermont, and it deals with exactly that, housing and conservation simultaneously. So.
Chris, if you send me an email, I think I went down that road a little while ago and have a couple of contacts for. I can send along.
Are there others, so like Eric was saying, what did things look like in 1926? Are there other pieces of information or data that you think would help us? Like, as Sabina was talking, I was thinking like the criteria that ERA would use for the ranking would be helpful data to have at some point if we are going to go down the road of like go to 1 to 35. grouping them into 2 or 3 or 4, like we do the criteria naturally. Some parts, some blocks fall into groupings. That would be helpful.
It'd be useful, just to talk to some developers about what hinders them from developing more in certain areas. And what I'm concerned about is if we put too much emphasis on the tight cluster developments, which have a great place to do a lot of good things. I live in one myself, so I'm perfectly happy with it. But for the many people who come to Vermont, because they want their 10 acres or more to live a wild life or a life away from the suburban, wherever they came from, that's anathema to what they want. They don't want to live in that development. They left Westchester County to have 10 acres, 15 acres, whatever it was. So are we shooting ourselves in the foot by telling them, sorry, you got to live in a clustered development on the side? Are we forcing more sprawl, saying the only way you can get your 10 acres is if you go out into the hinterlands? Are we forcing them into living conditions they don't want to share?
Yeah, I think you're right that there are people that are specifically looking for that, but I think there are a lot of other people that are looking for a wide diversity of housing, and housing at all. I mean, there is a huge housing crunch, yeah.
Well, and I think,
But those people will live in a different area. They're going to be perfectly content living right here. They're not going to say, well, I want to be out on Asheville Road, to use one of them that's out there, in a development with 20 houses and there's nothing nearby at all. They want to be near stores. They want to be near other people.
Speak for them.
We don't be assigning, but I think what you're
We're not giving them the choice.
getting at is are we gonna regulate out something that the free market is already providing an abundance of? And make it so that the only thing, so that now we've swung so far in the other direction that I think is what you're asking.
Yes.
Or what you're concerned about. I don't think that that's where we're at, but I hear what you're saying.
But I guess I wasn't imagining this as something that would preclude all of other development, more as a tool to have in our collective community tool belt to say, oh, if you want to develop, this is the best way to do it in this area. And it's not the only way to do it, but this is the best way, and this is why, and these are where the resources are, and those resources are
If you
important.
want to
to
get that
preserve.
natural resource density bonus, do this kind of development, and then you can, we'll put in the road for you, or whatever.
We need more housing.
yeah, it's
I don't
really.
stop at that point. We need more housing.
Yeah,
Let's
we
not try to make it harder.
Right, but there's carrots and sticks, and there's probably more carrots than that we haven't tapped into, like the Affordable Housing Committee. You guys said, like, what about impact fees? What about managing or taking over the road? Or what about providing a wastewater connection? We can entice. So having these kinds of illustrations are good to think about, like, what about this desirable? What are concerns about this? What about this meets our goals? What about this puts us further from our goals?
One view, like, you're going about something.
I am, but this is I'm just speaking for myself. I keep having this quote from an environmental educator going through my head, and he, David Orr, and he was like, it's not that we just need education, we need education of a certain kind. And that's where my head was going, like, I don't think we just need housing, and we need housing of a certain kind. Like, the market's taking care of single houses on 10 acres. Like, that's gonna happen. I think where I would like to see us put our energy is that housing of a certain kind. Whereas those illustrations are showing that very powerfully. And how do we incentivize that? So that's where my brow was furrowed, I guess, wasn't it?
Like you were just thinking.
Yeah.
The wheels were turning.
One way we get there is we say, instead of saying this lot is 1 acre, one house for 10 acres, we think it can support more, so let's put more on there.
Mhm.
Let's be flexible in what we zone, even within the NRO. If it's in the NRO and yet it's got great soils for septic, it's got great water, there's nothing super unique there, and it can support 10 houses, why not do it? And if we put it on 10 1 acre lots, because that's what people want to do it, why force them into 5 duplex buildings? Same number of units, one spread out. I know we don't like to spread, it's bad, blah, blah, blah. But that might be what a lot of people would prefer. And if we can just make it easier to build in the right places, not everywhere, in places where things would fit. I think we sometimes lose sight of that, and particularly when we get into the NRO, the conservation of, we want to preserve Jericho today. I bring up 1926. I've lived here long enough to remember coming around by the elm tree there and having a clear view of Mansfield. I remember driving down Route 15 and seeing Mansfield the whole way. You can't do that now. Jericho has changed. That's not a bad thing, but it is not stagnant, and we're not going to make it stagnant. So we have to think about what can we do to achieve a goal for housing we need while preserving what's important, not just preserving for the sake of preserving.
Well, I think that's why having the data about the resources is helpful, because it's not just aesthetic, like I like the view, or I like my privacy, or I like, well, individual preferences. It's really thinking about what resources are essential. And
Yeah,
what
what's
resources
essential?
are irreplaceable.
And some will be essential to others, but not, something that's essential to me may not be essential to you.
True, but we have like the whole scientific community from the state of Vermont to help us not have to be the expert, which is what we relied on when we did the NRO in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know that I even still know what some of the things on that list are. I know what the standard is for them, and I know how they're categorized, but I'm not. Okay, so any other thoughts you have about data, evidence that would help inform our decisions so that we're not just thinking about preferences would be good to know over the next, several weeks as we start working on it. Okay, good.
Yep.
No public comment. Okay, everybody ready to move on? Chris, back to you.
Yep, I just have 2 things for my report. One, if you weren't there, the select board voted in support of all of the planning commission's recommendations for going for the tier 1B designation. And then they even threw in an endorsement of the future land use map and the housing charter, CCRPC, which was pretty that. So I think the planning commission, I think we should feel really good about all the work that we did on that. To queue up that discussion with the select board, I think it was an easy decision for them to make because of all of the work that we did. The other is just something that happened last week. If you didn't already know this, is the Community Housing and Infrastructure Program CHIP legislation, which passed in Montpelier, which will give us another tool for raising money to build infrastructure. I think I heard today can raise, they're estimating 200 million annually across the state. So stay tuned for more about that. It just passed, so there's a lot more information that needs to come out about that. I put a link there to an article about it. It's the most clear article that I've read, sort of explaining what it is. The article doesn't start with that, so you have to read through something else, a couple paragraphs before you get to it. But anyway, that's really all that I've got.
We might not even have to vote on it. We might not even have a bond. No.
I think there was a discussion on that, if I recall correctly, that there's a fear that a lot of that is going to be going outside of Chittenden County. funding.
Well-
I seem to recall hearing that at the
I think,
select board meeting, that that's something people are worried about.
My understanding of how it's set up, it's like a TIF district where it's the taxes from that municipality can get dedicated to a specific infrastructure project.
Right, so like if you did wastewater for Riverside and then you build 150 houses and 20 businesses in Riverside, all the property taxes from all of that development for up to 20 years can be used to pay for the infrastructure. So if that method would work, we potentially don't have to get the whole
I
town.
see, but you're talking about the initial loan fund. That would then be paid back, that you're concerned it's gonna go to other places.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere that
I think
priority was outside of Chittenden County for that.
somebody mentioned that at the meeting, but I think it was just like somebody's fear spoken aloud, not necessarily based on reality.
but I do think that Jericho's, we are one of the wealthier towns in the state
Right.
by some metrics, and that will work against us. I think I appreciate your optimism. I think it's a little early to think that we wouldn't need a bond.
Well, maybe we need a smaller bond,
Yes.
you know, like it's just
Yes.
something that will help
Yeah.
incrementally reduce our burden.
I guess it depends on the need relative to the funding. So if there's
Get in
like.
there fast.
Exactly, I think it's more like,
Projects.
the faster you get there, the better defined your project is. You know, if you meet all the criteria. Which they haven't established yet, and they won't establish until the fall. So I think when we're doing our public outreach. We might wanna hedge a little bit on exactly how the financing is gonna work, like that sort of TBD and.
Yeah, I think the outreach is more like, here are all the reasons why you should support it
Yeah,
in general.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you gotta have a rebuttal to the, yeah, but who's gonna
Yes.
pay for it? Because somebody will pay for it. Like, I think there's a real misunderstanding about seeing that sticker price and thinking that that sticker price is on our backs and educating them that it is. Because that's gonna shut down
Be
conversation.
the first
I
question
think
from
it's-
everybody.
It's naive to think that you're gonna be able to start a conversation. And have it just be, this is gonna be wonderful, because they will close the door with, we can't afford that right now.
And then one other thing I didn't put on here, but I think it's already on the calendars. The select board, planning commission joint meeting next Tuesday at. 7:30.
we're working on an agenda, we'll have an agenda out to everybody ahead of time. Did a good job of documenting everything we talked about last time and trying to keep going on that. Right?
Yep, thank you. It's me. Yeah, I'm trying to-
Okay, so I just wanted to remind people that the select board is planning on, they have a deadline of June 24th to receive a letter of interest from anyone who is a candidate, and they are not veering from that process. So if you know anybody who's interested, they must submit a letter of interest by June 24th, and if they don't do it, then they can't be considered. And then they're interviewing candidates on the 26th, and they didn't say exactly when they would appoint, but soon thereafter. They did also at that same meeting,
Wait, the deadline is the 24th, and in 2 days, they're gonna
they're gonna interview.
go through all of those letters, and then, okay.
No, they did not say how quickly they would pick. They only said that they would interview on the 26th. So maybe they'll decide, if there's 10 people, they might invite 3 people back. If there's 3 people, they might, I don't know. They haven't actually said. They just were very clear. Letters of interest 24th, interviews on the 26th.
How long is the term?
It is until town meeting.
Oh, very short.
Yep, and
As
then,
opposed to when one person gets elected for one year term, second one for a 2-year term, and then all those renewal in 3 years.
2-year
2
cycle.
year
2-year
cycles.
cycle?
The 2 new people are 2-year cycles, except for the first time.
Yeah.
And the other positions are 3-year cycles.
So
So, and
they're all gonna go into 3-year cycles. then.
no, they stagger them so that you don't ever have everybody turning over at once. So somebody could wait until a 3-year term becomes available as somebody in the future. I've talked to a couple people and encouraged them to write a letter. I don't know how many letters they've gotten. I don't think they've gotten 100. I think they've gotten more than 2. Yeah. The select board did say thanks, but no thanks to the AARP to set up a temporary pedestrian partition on Wastewater Road. But is that the final word on that grant? But
That's the final word that hurts.
yeah, okay, so they won the grant, $3,500, and they decided that there was too much opposition from residents on the road. And that they really didn't want to spin their wheels for the next 3 months, listening to all that opposition at every select board meeting about how terrible it is. It's pretty much what I heard them say in that meeting. Both Eric and Peter were very frustrated. They were like, that's why, sure, it's easier to do nothing. And they were shocked at how strong the opposition was to such a small, temporary, seemingly innocuous idea. But so that was a no. So I think we have to kind of work with the bicycle pedestrian committee and help them kind of get back on track a little bit and decide what they're gonna work on next.
I also think it underscores for us, whenever we put something in front of them, that whenever we put something in front of the select board, that we arm them with a lot of information that they feel really confident about. And that we do that work for them and provide them with that, and also provide ourselves as a bit of a shield, because the opposition, it can be a lot from a very small number of people about a really small thing. And so, and I'm not saying obviously I have an opinion about this particular project, but I think it just underscores for us that, like, in order to do anything, we need to really be able to defend it and ultimately make sure that the select board feels comfortable and confident in being able to defend it.
But I think even what it underscores for me even more than that, I agree with you, but is the importance of public opinion well before something even gets to the select board. So yes, it's important that they have the information, but what matters more is what the general feedback is from the community in the 6 months before that, so that when the select board is ready to make their move, they feel either encouraged or discouraged. But
And or that positive feedback is just as strongly
That's
encouraged, because there was plenty of people in favor of that project. That were not as loud or as assertive.
That was exactly my takeaway, and we've heard that before from the select, but well, we only hear from the people who are complaining, so how else are we gonna interpret it? And Susan has said it, very eloquently, yes, you need to interpret that for the people who can't be there and who won't speak up and feel intimidated, even by their neighbors.
Very much.
Don't want to stick their neck out. So I think continuing to provide the opportunity for people to voice their opinion, through ways other than public speaking, but having it then carry over into the conversation. I think that's kind of what we fell away a little bit, in this last round of discussions for that topic. Because I know that, the local motion survey had positive responses, and when SJ and I were at the library meeting, there were people there who, were sort of in the favorable camp, but anyway, we all know this, it's not new.
Well, it's a good reminder though, because like we're about to start working on a new, packaging zoning, and we're thinking about conservation and rural areas and, the town plan appendix is like chock full of public comment that was solicited through the consultant that David Ray worked with, and they documented everything. And so even thinking about the interns, because a lot of people don't like public speaking, having opportunities for people to provide written input or one-on-one comments, and because a lot of people are intimidated and other people are intimidating. But I think we haven't looked at that in a while. So over the summer, as we're starting this work, it might be good for all of us to kind of take another look at that public engagement section of the town plan and refresh your memory and read some of the comments. They're pretty illuminating. I was just kind of breezing through and I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff in here.
On that same thing, with the wastewater planning going ahead, and I said this before, we really need to be sowing the seeds for that, because there's a lot of Oklahoma. We want to make wastewater happen. Select board needs to lead it, but everybody else has to lead the idea that this is good for everybody in Jericho. Because I can just hear hundreds of my neighbors saying, we've already got a community center, why do I care about this? And that's not the right answer.
And then the game plan for all the stakeholders that the interns were, talking about, communicating with and having them help bring out their message, that there be a stakeholder meeting before the first post goes out, so that everyone understands the game plan and has it, tattooed on their arm. Right? So that everyone is.
You have lots of ambassadors.
Same
message.
pitch, right?
And we also know who some of the more local community members are, and might be advantageous to recruit as many of them as we can to the right side of this argument for this discussion.
So I guess maybe that we should clarify this is, I wish this maybe had come up when we were on the phone, that they're doing this research right now. And the research will inform an eventual communications campaign.
Yeah, I was gonna.
They are not actually beginning to execute a communications campaign.
So I think when we first started to put this together, we were thinking that, by the end of the summer, they can have a website with videos and that kind of stuff on it. As we've sort of started doing this and talking to other communities and sort of what they've done, I think it's going to be more information of, these are things that we know that we're going to need to do. This is going to require $10,000. This is going to require, it'll give us a game plan for how to do what we want to do.
It's not necessarily gonna do it.
Correct.
Right. So it's like I'm thinking about McDonald's, they changed their logo to like I'm loving it. And I'm sure they researched that for 2 years, and the colors and the messaging and the music, and that they know from focus groups, from how people respond to ABC testing. So what the interns will be able to help us do is figure out which messages to emphasize.
Yeah.
What do people want to learn about? What is persuasive?
Where are
what
the red
will
flags?
persuade?
Yeah.
Right. What objections should we address head on?
Yeah, there's something about this I've been mulling over. I've been thinking, Chris, about asking people like what their concerns are, because we want to have a stronger argument versus asking people what their concerns are because we really want to know what they are. Because it feels a little, I don't know, and it's just extractive, right? If we just want to listen to you because we want to make sure that we can persuade you otherwise.
But I also think that you could phrase it as what are your thoughts and not what are your concerns.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about what the act of listening to someone without wanting to make them maybe it's about creating relationships with people that we don't necessarily have relationships with, because it feels like we're just going to listen to you versus we're going to listen to you and then we're going to try to figure out how we're going to use that information.
Feels sort of manipulated.
Yes.
But we do want to listen to them and understand their concerns, and where appropriate, find an answer for why this is or is not something to be worried about.
Yeah, I think that's a different message though.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to hear what you said, but we're not gonna railroad you into this, but if your concern is X, how do we alleviate that?
Yeah, or if there's really, if a concern or a thought or a feeling is based on misinformation or not enough information, like that feels different.
Yeah.
And that feels more
Actionable.
Yeah.
It's one of the few times that maybe the timeline of the task force is beneficial. Because I do kind of like the idea of collecting these concerns and then when the task force meets, they have this list of concerns as they're thinking about all of the different decisions and strategies and approaches and whatnot. Like in some ways, I think that it's not, it's not, or it doesn't have to be what you're kind of saying, Wendy, which I think is kind of like the McDonald's thing. Like, we want your feedback so that we can craft a really persuasive marketing campaign and make sure that, you know, that we woo you to our sides instead of what are these concerns, which yes, will inform the marketing campaign, but the task force hasn't even assembled yet. And we can bring those concerns and bring all of that information to the task force as they're making their decisions. As a participant or someone who's being interviewed, I feel like my opinion is more useful and respected if it's going to be handled in that way. It's a different deliverable, but it's not that different. Like, I think what you're getting at, Wendy, is the intention and the motivation behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then that will ultimately feed what you end up doing with the things, which is kind of where I'm coming at it from. But I think it's important, and I think particularly, I'm sure it's not unique to Jericho, but I definitely think that a lot of folks in Jericho have some folks may feel a little bitter about how their engagement or participation, how they feel like it is handled, and whether they see anything come out of it, whether they feel like they've been heard. And I certainly don't want to make that mistake with this.
I feel like our town plan outreach event was really successful and had a lot of positive feedback from the community. And I'm wondering if we can sort of emulate that to what's a level that's appropriate for the wastewater, and sort of take the best aspects of that and apply it. Yes, we heard really, I thought the public was very receptive to that.
I think that's a really good point, Sabina. And I think that the difference there was like we were inviting them to participate in our process.
Early on.
Yeah. And yes, it was kind of focus groupy, but the intention was really like, this is our town plan. This is your town plan. Help guide us in.
And we didn't require public speaking. we gave people the opportunity to talk in small groups, or they could fill out forms, they could email, they could, yeah, they had all kinds of, it was multimedia.
is that really appropriate for
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, like, in whatever way it is appropriate with that mindset and that generosity of spirit. you
Right.
know, Like,
But how do we deal with the naysayers in that group?
well, we had naysayers at our town meeting,
Yeah.
meetings, so.
But they were,
Well,
they
were
weren't
there.
saying we don't want planning at all. They were saying we think this is in the wrong place. The naysayers on wastewater are like, I don't want to pay for wastewater. How do we have to incorporate their perspective, I get it.
Well, I
But we
think
don't
that
want them to be the dominant voice.
wait until we decide, that to have an event maybe in the fall. And then we can kind of figure out like how
I'd love to have you there.
structured and how should we invite people in and what should we be prepared for?
I also wonder if we could reach out to HOAs. As a group that might, you could get a community all at once. And especially if they already have a community septic, they would be thinking, well, this isn't for me. So that might be another way, another group. I heard on the radio this, must have been last fall, but the interview about somebody who was campaigning for Kamala Harris, and they were told that the best strategy, then they went to the Midwest, in a, very, red communities. And they said the best strategy is to just have a conversation. Don't convince, don't try to sell anything, just discuss. And they spent, they ended up going to this farmer's house and they had dinner and having dinner with them, and they spent a long time there. And as they were leaving, he said, I'm not sure I'm gonna vote for her, but I really appreciate the conversation and I might vote for her. I think that can be the way to do this, is just a conversation.
And part of that conversation in the groups that might say, well, I don't see how this matters to me, right? Is then to start turning on the bigger benefits to the town, right? It does matter, it may not matter to you in the terms of the wastewater system, but it matters to you in the fact that your taxes may not go up. And
If you have a restaurant you can go to.
You'll have that, property values will go up.
Right, your kids
Right.
could live here.
So all those things then come into that conversation, and it's not so much about what I'm giving up, it's like what I'm getting.
Right.
Well, it's okay, so that's not important to you, you don't, what are the things in town that are important to you? And I guarantee we'll be able to draw a line from all of those things that are
Right.
important. Yeah.
So we got here talking about Raceway, that they got turned down, but maybe there's a possibility of somehow using the grant differently, but it's for the time being, that's what we heard. I think it's good learning for us. You guys brought up a lot of really good points. Also just to make you aware that the next select board meeting, or I think on June 26th, is when they will hold a public hearing on our zoning amendments. And that's when the interviews for the select board candidates will be, and those interviews are in their meeting for the public. So you can listen to any one of those. Feeling really good about the zoning amendments. Chris is really, in terms of giving them the background and the briefing and all the data and the evidence and the process, and here's what's in this zoning. You don't necessarily need to read, you're not gonna read it, but line by line, here's the big picture of what's in there. So I think I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, I think. I mean, and Susan's helped craft this too, but like, these are the comments that we expect that you're gonna get at the hearing, and here's context for what those are, and giving them the information that they need to make a good decision.
Yeah, Chris is like going to help them anticipate what we know all those public comments will be, many of which we heard here from lots of
And I do think it is helpful to say, like, we heard those concerns and we wrestled with them, and this is where we landed because It's, you know, it's not a like, oh, that concern is not worth paying attention to because that's why I see it. Like, yeah, we thought about it.
And this is how it changed.
This is how it changed and or, you know, this is why it didn't change. This is where we landed, but we as a group got there and here was our thinking. And maybe it aligns, maybe it doesn't. What is our role? Would you like us to attend? If we were to attend, what, I don't know, what is our role as members in a public hearing like that isn't our public hearing?
So it's great to attend. I think the select board appreciates the support of the group that did the work. We would be available to answer questions if any questions were directed toward us, but it's not for us to chime in. But Chris is actually presenting the material to the select board with kind of the highlights of what's in there and leading them through the action we're asking you to take. And are we thinking they're going to take an action at that meeting, right?
Yeah, it's only scheduled to have one.
That one hearing. So they might vote to approve or not at that meeting, or they might decide to vote at their next meeting. They'll listen to public comment. So I think our role would be moral support.
I think it is, so I mean, I will be doing what I do, but I think it would be good to have, and probably you, Susan, because I think having someone from the planning commission there who is of Jericho and is representing the commission is always good to, it's good to have. They can answer questions and.
So if you wanted to toss a question to any one of us that's there, or if they direct a question to us, but it wouldn't be, I don't think it seems appropriate, like you hear the conversation spinning a little bit to interject. I mean, you can raise your hand if you want to, but I don't think we'll need to.
I have the impression that the select board doesn't take a lot of public comment during their meetings.
They do, yeah, they have a more concise requirement for public comment, but this is a public hearing, so it's a separate meeting from their meeting.
What time is that? Is it a different time?
My understanding, Eric, is that they are selecting items from their agenda for which they will have public comment.
Kind of like we do.
But very specifically though, I mean, yeah, I guess we don't have it on everything, but yeah, like we do.
Right. But in the hearing, I think they'll welcome more public comment. I think they'll still keep people 3 minutes each. You did true. Okay, and the last thing I want to say is about the DRB is that there's a hearing on June 25th. The Palmer Maple owners are requesting a site plan review. Now that we know there's different kinds of reviews, the site plan review for a parking lot. And there's some arrangement to use somebody else's land behind the post office. And their request is for a 54 space parking lot in that location.
Wow.
And that's on June 25th. So just in terms of liaison DRB, that's, I mean, the DRB has not met in a long time. They have had no applications in a long time. That's their first meeting in a long time.
They don't broadcast that, do they?
Yeah, you can go on the website and you can look up all the diagrams.
You can watch it online.
Oh, yeah. Live, you can watch it, yeah.
You can watch it live, you can watch it on the YouTube and stuff.
Yeah, and nobody knows you're there. Yeah. Okay, any other?
You're like,
Sorry, that was quite long and I spoiled Chris's idea of getting it done at 8.
But then they don't see me like.
Is there anything else of any liaison?
I was gonna give some updates when I thought the agenda was gonna end at 8:30 and then.
Yeah, I know.
But it's 8:54, so I feel bad about,
I think it's really nice though to have an opportunity to talk about things and to not be in a rush.
Yeah.
and not be interrupted.
So I don't think I wanna, well, the first update I have is just that the Town Meeting Reimagine Task Force, will start meeting again to plan for this year's, round of town meeting. So our first meeting back, will be June 30th. And so just to have on your radar that planning for that, for those 3 meetings will kick off again. Affordable Housing Committee met last week. Okay, 5 minutes. I can do it in 5 minutes. So we've got 3 main things that we're focusing on in this kind of ad hoc period of Affordable Housing Committee. One is just keeping an eye on DRB. And nothing new to report there. Like you said, it's been really quiet. I do want to note that the Governor Peck development didn't go for a density bonus. And I know that they were kind of looking at different bonuses and decided not to go with any of them. And so I wonder if there's a lesson for us there to look into. So Chuck has done a huge research undertaking of all of the HOA and covenants in Jericho. And he's got lots of really great information. Some of the highlights that I wanted to bring here, it's that about 1/3 of homes in all homes in Jericho have a covenant or an HOA. Almost all in the village district. One of the things that was really fascinating and I want us to be aware of is that many of them are shared wastewater. So there are small developments from maybe 10 houses, maybe all the way up to 40 that have a shared wastewater system. So I think that's important when we're thinking about development, that it doesn't have to just be a community, right? And that we have working examples of shared wastewater systems. What is important about that, though, is that they are wastewater constrained, that those developments cannot have ADUs. They are not sites for potential infill because they have a constrained wastewater. And I mean, we know that for Starboard, but there are others, right? And so I think that that's important to know. And Chuck has characterized all of them as mapping them so that we can identify where they are. The other thing that I think is where, as Affordable Housing Committee, and I think we're hoping to talk to DEI about this too, is now that we have this inventory, there are some HOAs that like have an HOA president and they have meetings and they do stuff. There are a lot of them that like don't register in so I have one that we all thought, many of my neighbors and I thought was defunct and no longer pertain to us anymore, which isn't true. And so we have all of these now. It would be really great to bring them to people's attention, particularly to bring to people's attention some of the exclusive things that are in there, educating them on how maybe to change them. I know that there is some hesitancy about the town giving legal advice and getting involved in that. And so we need to understand that, but at the very least, Chuck has gone through and pulled every single covenant, and I wasn't able to find mine. I'm sure we got one when we bought the house, but I can't find it. So the fact we have this really great resource that we can educate the public on and maybe provide some information about, if there's stuff in there that you might want to change, or if this HOA isn't serving you and is actually putting your property at risk because you have a commercial vehicle in your driveway because that's your job, but your HOA isn't, and you get in a fight with your neighbor and now they can point to this legal, but just making people aware. So anyway, so there's a lot of like places we can go with that, but a huge amount of research has been done by Chuck. I think it's really interesting. He's starting to map where all of these are so we can get an idea of that, which I think again is particularly important for the wastewater constrained areas, especially if infill is something that we're trying to push forward. And then the last thing was the housing report that we put together is primarily my responsibility. And so I just went through housing sales and the state of our rentals in Jericho. And so, 1 minute. Okay. So last year looked a lot like 2023. We sold about 51 houses. Of those 51, only 20% were affordable to lower or middle income folks. So that's houses that are 450,000 or below. So we've got 10 of those. And as you would expect, a large majority of those 10 all have either NOAA, so naturally occurring affordable housing characteristics, or you could also consider them affordable by design. So 9 of them are in village or village center districts. 4 of them are condos. Those condos turn over. They are so heavily utilized. 7 of them are on a half acre or less. 8 of the 10 are 2,000 square feet or less. 5 of the 10 have 2 or fewer bedrooms. 8 of them are on either public or community, either water or wastewater. The newest of them are the condos. I think the newest condo on the list was 94. The rest of them, the single family dwellings, are in terms of rentals, the percentage of rentals in Jericho has decreased in the last 4 years. So we used to be in double digits and now we're down to 8% rentals. Our neighbors have obviously more rentals than that. Bolton, Essex, Richmond all have significantly more rentals than that. For example, Richmond, 20% of their housing stock is rentals. The other thing, when you look at the rentals, and again, we don't have that many, but all of the rentals across the board, so Chittenden County, the median rent, and this data is real fuzzy because we don't have a rental registry in Vermont. So these numbers are real fuzzy, and they probably don't include all of the ADUs. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But median rent in Chittenden County increased about 20% from 2020 to the last time we have data for, which is 2023. That 20% was similar, increase was similar in Bolton, in Essex. Richmond increase was only 10%. In Jericho, the increase in rent was 60%. 902, guys. 902.
Well, the clock passed. Oh, no, it's slow.
So our number of rental units, or the percent of rental units in Jericho has gone down. The rent has gone up relative to neighbors.
Was it artificially low before, or was it market?
Even if it was artificially low, 20% for Chittenden County as a whole and 20% for most of our neighbors versus 60% increase for us.
But do we know why?
Is the rental market across the county just tightening? Is that what rents are going up? That's why rents are going up.
One of the good things about Jericho is that we have very few short-term rentals. So some of the rental and short-term rentals don't go into this, but some of the towns that had real big drops in the percent of their housing that was rental, that drop was accompanied by a large increase in short-term rentals.
That would be VRBOs kind of things.
Right.
Remember when we did the town plan, we did question of the month? As you were talking, I was like, all the data that you guys have assembled and presented to the planning commission and to the select board over the last, 2 years, 3 years, I know has really opened my eyes and I think really impacted the town plan and the zoning work that we just finished and the zoning work we're about to do. So it makes me kind of think, like thinking about the wastewater too, is that almost like you need like this drip of getting this kind of information out into the public's mind.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you guys would consider doing some sort of, I don't know, like a housing fact, did you know, housing fact of the month. And if you did that once a month for a year, if you could really open people's eyes to, because everybody here has a house.
Yeah.
They're not, sure, lots of people want to move and know people who want to move and whatever, but just the information has been really eye-opening, I think, and if it could be delivered like just very, no persuasion, no, you know, just here's the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
Did you know? I think it could be kind of.
Well, and I think, so, that is one part of the housing report, which will also include building permits and certificates of occupancy, which will be what I report on at the next meeting, and then it'll be combined into a larger report that then also has some recommendations for moving forward. But if, as we work on enabling housing, I think just a drip of information without a point to it, can be useful, but I would be interested in doing that if it was if it, maybe not necessarily building to something, but if it was adding to the conversation about the work that we're doing here, that would help kind of prime the ground for an eventual public hearing on this work. I think that would be.
Well, the information you were giving on, these are the characteristics of the houses less than 450,000. Those are all characteristics that would be so much easier to create if you had a municipal wastewater system.
Mm-hmm. And these are all characteristics that you don't find in the housing that's being provided by the market today. These are all the characteristics that we are trying to find ways to enable and or incentivize. Yeah.
Right, so it's sort of like the rationale behind the policy.
Yeah.
But we're like 2 years ahead in this conversation and in this room was 2 years ahead of where a lot of the general public knowledge is.
I know it's 9:06,
Yeah.
but I will have conversations with people where they are not supportive of wastewater, and then the next thing they segue to is how expensive housing is, and their kids can't live here.
Right.
Yeah, and it goes back to Sabina's point. So, okay, so that's not important to you. What is important to you? And it will be, my son wants to move back here to move a family and can't find, or to build a family and can't find a house.
Or even just the other that like actually municipal wastewater isn't like, ooh, first time ever. We have all these neighborhoods that have
We have
a shared wastewater. So maybe that's a learning is like the terminology. Shared is, or community is different than municipal.
Yeah.
Except,
Depends who's paying for it.
except that we're asking the town as a whole to pay for this, as opposed to those neighborhoods have, that those 10 houses are the ones that paid for that. So it's slightly different, but
Like you say, that all your HOAs that have that can tag in. It's a different story, but that's not gonna happen and it shouldn't.
There's a lot of, like, we don't know how to change that.
Right, right.
We got to.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
work to be done. Okay, does anybody have any other updates? Other business? July 2nd. So our tentative agenda for July 2nd is what? You know,
I
you don't know.
correct.
So last time we met, we had enough people that we could have a quorum. I don't know that I'm sure we have a lot of work to do, so I'm sure it would be productive. We still want to have the meeting.
I can tell you, like, I know what I'm gonna be working on between now and then, which is finalizing things for the select board's hearing, doing some capital budget planning stuff, making sure the wastewater team is doing what they need to do, and then putting together the developers forum. And all of those are things that I don't, like, I can't think of anything that I'm really gonna be working on to bring to the planning commission to get feedback on or to update you on. I mean, I can give updates on all of those things, but I don't know how important that is.
I think we should not have the meeting. And hopefully the BMG will get passed and then Chris and everyone else can have a little bit more time
I know I will not be here in the meeting after that.
Okay, so that would be
That,
two in a row.
That's fine, but if you'll need.
So
me,
you're not there on the whatever that is, and Sabina won't be
August.
there, but I would be there.
I can be by Zoom.
I would be there.
I would be there. Okay, so I think we'll be okay. Okay, so no meeting on the second, so we will, plan commission won't hold a meeting on the second, but we will have a meeting on the 16th.
Great.
And I'm assuming that by the 16th, we will be in a more structured position to really continue to work on enabling housing. Whether that's an NRO focus or zoning focus or deed focus, that's what we'll work on in between now and then.
You mean
The first.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday.
first?
Oh,
July
It's a good
1st.
thing.
Okay.
Oh, right, July 1st is our meeting.
Oh, it is?
Mhm.
Yeah, you have Wednesday dates instead of Tuesday dates.
Oh,
All right,
Or
so,
the second.
so the first, and then is it the 16th?
The 15th.
The 15th. Okay, so by the 15th, we should be in a better position
that's the worst.
on enabling housing.
I finally got them all right on the agenda in terms of like the minutes that we're approving, all that kind of stuff, so. Got
You
it.
were this, right?
Yeah,
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Sabina, thank you. A second.
A second.
Wendy, thank you. All those in favor of adjourn, say aye. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone.